Restoring the Father's name Yahweh. Restoring the Messiah's name Yahshua. Re-establishing Torah covenant. Preparing the bride. The revealing of the sons of Elohim. Prophecy. The return of Melchizedek, the royal priesthood. Elijah's school of the prophets. The Way Ministries. A return to the Philadelphian spirit.
Let's open in prayer. Abba, Father, in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach, we just want to bless you and thank you again for this Shabbat, this beautiful day that you've given to us, and the rest that we get to enjoy, the physical rest, the spiritual rest, the mental, the emotional rest. And there are those, Abba, who just have not been able to rest on the Sabbath. And we just pray, Abba, that you will comfort them and help them to understand how they can get past their flesh, to help them to be able to rest on the Sabbath, Abba, to cut loose from this world and to honor you on your Shabbat day. And so, Abba, today I just pray that you help me to articulate your word and to convey your thoughts as I interpret them from your scriptures as best as I can understand how you've given it to me, that it might be for the edification of the body of Messiah Yeshua. So we just want to bless you and thank you. We invite your Ruach here today, Abba, to enlighten us, to strengthen us, to encourage us, Abba, when a world that's beating us down so much through the week, we need to be uplifted in our souls and in our hearts. So we just bless you and we thank you and we commend the rest of this day into your hands. May it honor and bless you to see your people worshiping you in spirit and truth. In Yeshua's name, amen. Amen. All right, well, we're continuing on in, I got 11 here. It's supposed to be 1 John 4, 1 through 11. This is part 8. And if I had to give a title to today's message, it would be A Changed Heart. In order to do what John has been compelling through these scriptures, you can only do it if you have a changed heart. That's the reoccurring theme that I get from everything that he's writing in these texts. And yet, sadly, so many in the body of Messiah today really have not transformed their heart. They've hardened their hearts in so many different kinds of ways. But today I want to hone in more about this aspect of love. Man, I'll tell you the truth, I never thought I would be able to come at love from so many different angles. This guy just won't let me out of this. Every week when I go through these texts, it's love, 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 love. And it's just, he's just pounding. I'm like, all right already. How many different angles can I explain this love, you know? And it's like, wow. And I'm like, you know, somehow I make it through another week. I didn't think I was a guy that was capable of explaining love in so many different ways. I think my wife's getting a little jealous because I don't explain it to her as much as I do in these messages. So I've got to repent of that. But I was, you know, today, as I was listening to Tom read in the New Testament about the Torah portion, the Brit Hadashah, there was one particular spot where he was reading about Zacharias and Elizabeth. And, you know, today Christianity says you don't need to keep the law. And you don't need to keep it because Jesus already did it for us. Therefore, it's not necessary. Okay? And you can't keep it anyway because no man can keep the law. I say that's a lot of bull. Because then you're not believing what Yeshua said in his own words as Tom was reading about Zacharias and Elizabeth. Because it says they kept the commandments perfectly without blame. And when you tell a Christian something like that, they don't like it because the implication is it compels them to have to keep the commandments, which goes directly against church doctrine. But yet, it's the fulfillment, the love is the fulfillment of the law. And it's this special kind of love that Yahweh imparts to his people, to the privileged few. And I don't mean to stand up here and say that we're elitist or we're special beyond anybody else or anything that matter, because our righteousness are as filthy rags just like anybody else. But what I'm going to say is that when we go through this teaching today, we're going to see that it's a small group of people that Yahweh in these times is changing their heart and is imputing his love into the heart of his people. And unfortunately, too many people are fighting against the commandments, and they're doing everything they can to not keep the commandments, and then they can't fulfill the law with love, because love is defined by the commandments. But if you reject the very instructional, righteous teaching of the commandments, you can't understand how to display love. We had a couple here last week who are from the Christian church. They came to visit, and I've talked to them before, and they were asking me questions about the husband is Jewish, but he wasn't brought up in the Jewish faith, and his mother is Jewish. She wasn't brought up in the Jewish faith either, but they identify as Jews. And they were talking to her about coming over to Jesus. And they were running into some dead ends with her because she was becoming distressed about it. There were some aspects to it that she was embracing, but there were other parts of it that were disturbing her. So they were asking me, what is my opinion? How should they approach her on that? And right away, Yahweh said to me, don't pull any punches. And so what I said to them, I said, if you're trying to bring a Jewish woman to Jesus based on the Christian concept, you are doing the greatest dishonor to this woman that you could possibly do. And they both sat back and they looked at me and like, why would you say that? And I said, because what you're asking is, you're asking a Jewish woman to forsake the commandments and follow a Gentile Messiah who speaks against those commandments. I said, that's quite a bit of a distress for a Jewish person. And so I said, what you're doing is wrong. And shame on you for doing something like that. And they just sat there. And then so the woman says to me, I don't mean this to be disrespectful. It's going to get across the point of what I'm trying to get across here today. And so she says, but didn't Jesus come to do away with the commandments? So we don't have to. Didn't he fulfill the commandments? Yes, he fulfilled the commandments, but what's your point? Well, the point is if he already fulfilled it, then why do we need to do it? I said, you know what? I said, I'm going to illustrate to you just what kind of hypocrites we human beings are. And she goes, what do you mean? I said, you're married to this man right here, the Jewish man. I said to her, how would you like it if your husband went out and started dating other women? And she stuck back right away, oh, he better not. He better not. He'll be in trouble with me. I said, you're a hypocrite. She goes, well, why are you calling me a hypocrite? I said, I'm calling you a hypocrite because on average, this is the response that I get from Christians. You're a hypocrite simply because you want to make laws that regulate your husband in your marriage. But when it comes to Yahweh imputing his marriage laws between you and his Messiah, that's out the window, unacceptable. I don't need to be obedient to my spiritual husband, but my husband damn well better be obedient to my laws and not be dating other women. I said, you're a hypocrite. And they sat there and they looked at me like, I never looked at it like that before. This is something to think about. We are hypocrites. We have double standards. And this is the problem with the church today. It has double standards. It wants the benefit of accepting a Messiah, but not truly showing the love to the Messiah. Because Yeshua said, if you love me, the big word is the if you love me, you will keep my commandments. And the opposite of that is, if you don't love me, then you won't keep my commandments. And I don't want to oversimplify the covenant of Yeshua, but basically it says you will know them by their fruits. What I do is when people tell me they love the Messiah, I look at it and I see, are you keeping the commandments? And if you got a hostile attitude against the commandments, you have a hostile attitude towards my Messiah. And you're not my brother and you're not my sister. And I won't refer to you as such. It doesn't mean I won't love you, I won't respect you. I wouldn't give you the shirt off my back if I was compelled to do that. I would do those things because I would love you to the degree that Messiah loved me, because he convicted me. I was a sinner and I need to repent. And repentance only comes from understanding what the Torah says, what sin is. And yet today, sadly, people want to go to church on Sunday and they want to proclaim that they have a covenant. Yeah, they do have a covenant. They have the covenant of Hagar. It's a covenant. It's a death covenant. It's a covenant that if you don't come out of it, you will die. And I don't want to go on too much more about that. That's just the lead in. So let's go ahead and let's start in verse 1. It says, man, this is supposed to be chapter 4. This has been a rough week. Oh, forgive me, but this is 1 John chapter 4, verses 1 through 11. Just keep that in mind. Beloved, do not believe as to entrust one's well-being in every spirit. See, we shouldn't accept every single spirit that comes into our midst. We have to test the spirits. You need to know who in the world you're dealing with. Because there's a lot of imposters out there, and they come in and they talk a good game and they look like they're walking the walk. But when you start testing them, you start finding out what they're really all about. And you're like, oh no, I can't hook up with you. Not on that level. I can't be unequally yoked with you. I can be yoked, but I'm going to be in control. And you're going to be subservient. And that's the only kind of covenant that I'll walk with you, with such a person. In every spirit of human or angelic origin, because we have to remember, those who are not in the body of Messiah and those who do not subscribe to this covenant that I've been talking about, you cannot get hooked up with those people. And those people, in many cases, have jurisdictional spirits that are working in their life to get at you. They're just using them as a proxy. And if you don't understand what kind of a spirit that person has, you get caught up with him, you're in bondage. You've been sold into slavery. And now you're going to have to fight like hell to get broken free from that slavery. A lot of repenting is in order. But test with discernment and trying the spirits whether they are of Yahweh, because many false prophets who are religious imposters have gone out into the world. And sadly, we've got too many Torah teachers who are not operating in the jurisdiction in which Yahweh called them. And there's one that wrote some famous books, I won't mention by name, but he was talking about how in September everything's going to come to a collapse. And I said for the last year, he's a false prophet. He's out of office. Stop working outside your office and your calling. You are not a prophet. And all these guys I've watched for years and years and years. I've been in this 35 years now, and I watch them one by one falling down. Because they start putting their butts out there, their tuchus out there, and proclaiming stuff that Yahweh has not told them. And we got the body of Messiah flocking after them, pouring money into their pockets to buy their videos and their books. And then are fighting and arguing online about all stuff. And look what happened. Nothing happened. I said nothing was going to happen. People come to me, what about the blood moons and this and that? It's hogwash. Stop buying into that garbage. Straighten up. Get tough, man. We're going to have to get tough. Man, we're being assaulted by all kinds of garbage out there, and we take it hook, line, and sinker. Oh, that really sounds good. Really? Have you tested the spirit? I think not. Because if you test those spirits, Yahweh will speak to you, and he will tell you that's hogwash. Don't buy it. But we don't do that. Oh, it sounds good. He's got a big name. People are inviting him all over the world to come speak in their big congregation. So what? That doesn't make it truth. Man, I've just had so many years of watching these false teachers out there just deluding the people of the body of Messiah. That's why I'm so passionate about this. And I'll take my flax for it. I really don't care. Shaul did. Anyway, verse 2, by this you know the spirit of Yahweh, every spirit that confesses and acknowledges covenant. What covenant? A covenant of Torah, backed up by the blood of Messiah. That's what it is we're supposed to confess. But the church will not confess blood with Torah. Won't do it. because it goes against their covenant, which is the covenant of Hagar. It's a mixed covenant. It has a little bit of truth. It has a whole lot of lies mixed with it. That, in my book, is called deception. It's religious deception. It's to make you feel like where you are is just fine. You're in good shape. Just confess Jesus' name, confess His blood. You don't have to change a thing in your life, and certainly don't be going over to the Sabbatarians, and you'll be just fine. Oh man, are you in trouble? That Yeshua HaMashiach has come in the flesh of Yahweh. You see, what is he saying? What he's saying is, Yeshua came in the flesh to what? To confirm this covenant of Torah, the marriage contract, that he would write it on the hearts of his bride to be. And it's only that those women, those virgins who have the laws of Yahweh written on their heart are going to be the ones that say, I will follow my husband wherever he goes. Well, then start looking at all the ones who don't follow his teachings. So this idea that somehow there's no difference between that side and this side, I say you can believe whatever you want. But the evidence is slapping you right in the face, and you still deny. Shame on you if you're still denying it. We got people in the Bible Messiah that are going over on Christmas Day into a Christian church and proclaiming Yeshua. And there's nothing wrong to be in there on Christmas Day. My gosh. Have you not learned anything in this life yet, in this walk with Yeshua? But sadly, at least down this way, a lot of the congregations you go to, it's a Babylon. You got all kinds of ideologies in these congregations. It's anything and everything goes. Nobody holds anybody to account of right or wrong anymore. And that's a downright shame. I went through this, I think, in part 3, but I think it fits with going through this again. I'm going to ask the question, what does it mean to deny the Son and the Father? And I went through this extensively in part 3, but I'm going to just touch on this question part. So my question was, as I stated back then, ask a Christian, do you love Jesus? Oh, praise Jesus! Praise His name! Glory be to Jesus! Okay? That's what you'll get. But here's the thing. Questions are powerful because everything is context. Everything is context. Based on this definition of asking this person about that Jesus, the Son of the Father came to do away with the commandments and free us from the curse of the law and give salvation through faith alone without any obedience to the commandments afterward. To be covered by the blood, as no one can keep the law, so why try when we already did it for us and you cannot lose your salvation? That's their ideology. That is so anti-New Testament, it's not even funny. You have to outright disregard tons of scriptures in Yeshua's own words to arrive at this kind of ideology. This is anti-Messiah talk, anti-Yeshua talk. But when you ask them, do you love Jesus? They'll do it. They'll say yes based on this concept. That's the context. Let's move on. If your answer is yes, and 99% of the time in that context it would be, then the truth is not abiding in you and love has not been perfected in you. Go back and look at 1 John chapter, I think it's 2 it is. I went through that in there. This would make you anti-Yeshua, which means you would not believe that Yeshua came in the flesh to establish His Father's will. What is His Father's will? His Father's will is to establish His Torah on the earth, because what does it say in the millennium? And the Torah will go out from Jerusalem to the four corners of the earth. He wants His word, which is His heart, written on man's heart. That's His will. But Christianity will tell you, oh no. To be under the law is to be under a curse. That's what they'll tell you. So you would not believe in Yeshua's come in the flesh to establish His Father's will, which by default means you deny the Son and the Father. Because if you refuse to believe that Yeshua came to establish His Father's covenant of law, of Torah, with His bride, then you're denying that man that came by default. So when we ask who is denying the Father and the Son, it all comes down to how do you ask that question? Because you got that camp over there and you got this camp over here, and the two are not reconcilable to one another. They're in so much opposition, there's no similarity between them at all. Not even close. Even a 5-year-old could be able to understand this, and we got people in the faith for 15, 20 years, and they still can't understand this. And I have serious questions about whether they're true believers or not. Because my book, I don't know about theirs, but my book tells me the Spirit of truth will lead you into all truth. If you'll let it. That's the problem. That means there has to be a change of a heart. If there's no change of a heart, the Spirit of truth will not lead you into truth because you've closed the front door and it can't come in. Man, we've got to wake up, because these times we're coming into, brothers and sisters, is a serious time. Your crown is at stake. So now let's ask another question. Do you love Yeshua? So you ask the same Christian, do you love Yeshua? Now, if they happen to know what the name of Yeshua means, based on their understanding, they'll probably say, yeah, because they'll equate Yeshua and Jesus as one and the same. But context is everything. So let's establish this context of the name of Yeshua. Based on this definition, Yeshua has come as the Son of the Father to establish his Father's commandments on the earth for all men to keep. If the person says yes, they do love Yeshua, then you have his truth abiding in you, which means his love is perfected in you, and you have not denied the Son and the Father. So you can't get to the Father without the Son. You're going to have to acknowledge that the Son came in the flesh to establish his Father's commandments, not do away with them. I don't know how many times that's got to be said, but if they reject that, then they've rejected Yeshua. And there's your departation from the two Messiahs, right there. And clearly that person has established this is the camp that I'm in, as opposed to that camp over there. And there's just too many people that are trying to meld these two camps together. It doesn't fit scripturally. If you want to be honest with yourself, now if you're into self-delusion and lying to yourself, be my guest. Party on. Take the bait, the rancid bait, and see where it takes you. Verse 3, and every spirit that does not, by absolutely denying and confess and acknowledge the covenant that Yeshua HaMashiach has come in the flesh is not of Yahweh. It's very clear what he's saying. But again, it comes down to the context. What is that covenant? What does that covenant encompass? What does it mandate? What does it require? And that's where each and every one of us have to ask that question. And this is the spirit of the anti-Messiah. This is the spirit of the anti-Messiah, who is in opposition, which you have heard was coming and is now already in the world. It's not hard, people. It's not hard to learn how to draw a line in the sand. Just because you draw a line in the sand doesn't mean that they're your enemy. It doesn't mean that they're your friend, but it doesn't mean that they're your enemy. It doesn't mean that you have to hate them or shun them. On the other hand, it's the exact opposite, because Yahweh has given his love to you, and you were an enemy at one time to Yahweh, and he bestowed that grace and honor on you, and that should compel you to do to somebody else who doesn't believe the same way. But too many in the body of Messiah, what I'm seeing is this. They're saying, what they're saying, or the implication of what they're saying is, wait a minute, John, wait a minute. If you're saying this, then in my mind, this means that the Christian is our enemy. No, I never said that. That's an erroneous belief that you got. But that don't mean that's what I got. So don't impute that foolishness onto me, because I help Christians all the time. I help atheists. I help anybody that I feel Yahweh's led me to help. And I would only do that because I am careful and I care and I have compassion for that person, what they're going through. Is that a demonstration of hate? No. But if you want to establish that you have an absolute belief that to put them in that camp means they're your enemy and you don't have anything to do with them, that's your erroneous belief. And what I would suggest is you need to change that. You should be compelled to change it by what John is telling us in these texts. If Yahweh gave you his love, you are compelled to extend that love. They may not like what you're going to tell them, like what I had to tell these people. You can be sure they ain't going to like what I got to say. Their flesh got cut up, I'm sure. But you know what? My flesh got cut up when Yahweh spoke to me that I need to repent and start keeping his Torah. It worked out well for me. It should work out well for anybody else. The only way it doesn't work out very well is if you fight it. So you know what they say, if you can't beat them, join them. And I couldn't beat it. Verse 4, you are of Yahweh, little children, have overcome, subdued to the point of victory over them, because he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world. And sadly, that's not what's happening today. Sadly, what's happening today is too many in the body of Messiah are being consumed by these other ideologies because they don't stop to test those spirits to see if it's kosher or not. They are of the world, therefore they speak as of the world, and the world hears them. We should not be hearing what they have to say, and what it means by that is accepting what they're saying as truth. It should rub you very badly. 1 John 4, 1 through 11 continued. We're back here. It says, we are of Yahweh. He who knows Yahweh hears us. He is not of Yahweh and does not hear us. By this we know the spirit of truth, that has not been concealed, not to us it has not been concealed, the spirit of error, which is fraudulence and straying from orthodoxy. And there's a lot of that's going on. Verse 7, beloved, let us love one another, for love is of Yahweh. And everyone who loves is born or regenerated of Yahweh and knows and follows Yahweh. That word knows means the action associated with the belief or being born and regenerated is you follow. But the church is not telling you to follow. The church is saying don't get caught up in that because you're under a curse. But the natural result of being born is you should show the fruits that you're following the Torah. And you do it not because of obligation, you do it because of the love that Yahweh has put in your heart for the marriage contract. I follow my wife's laws as best as I can understand what a woman impugns with those laws, and sometimes it takes a lot of deep thought to try to understand what in the world they're talking about. But I try to do the best I can because I love my wife. I do it because I love her, not out of grudging obligation. A case like that is yesterday I had a whole bunch of computer work I had to do, and some raccoon's been dropping big giant turds on my patio out back here, and it stinks like a cesspool. And my wife says, I want you to go out there and clean all that turds out there. And that's what I had to do. I was not happy about it because I was tired. I wanted to go lay down and take a nap. And I told my flesh, take a back seat, go do what your wife says, and then she'll let you sleep in peace. And that's what I was able to do. But it was a nasty job, man. It was a nasty job. Yeah, some piles like that. I'm like, what size raccoons are these? They're big.
Are you sure they were
And I don't know. I'm starting to wonder. I would say something, but I'm not going to say it because I'm just going to get in more trouble I'm already in. Anyway, in verse 8, it says, he who does not, by expressing an absolute denial of love, does not know and does not follow Yahweh, for Yahweh is love. In verse 9, in this the love of Yahweh was manifested, rendered apparent towards us. If it's not rendered apparent towards you, there's something wrong going on. I talk with my brother Anthony all the time, and we talk about how we got first called to this faith. Man, I knew right on the spot who I was, what I was called to do. Ain't nobody going to tell me one way or the other and persuade me of something different. I knew what I knew, what I knew. And yet there are many people who still, after many years, still don't know who in the world they are. And they don't know what they're supposed to be doing. And they're trying to appease different groups of people, and they go over here and they behave like this. They go over here and they behave like that because they want to be accepted. I don't care about being accepted. You don't like me, you don't like me. I'm going to follow the truth. Yeshua says he who is not giving up father, mother, son, daughter, friends, or who doesn't follow me has no part with me. You can't get hung up on family, friends, social life, and all that. He's not telling you to hate them. He's not telling you to disregard them. He's not telling you not to be around them. What he's telling you is get it in the right order. Stop making them your idols. Stop allowing them to dictate to you how you're supposed to behave. I am what I am because Yeshua has redefined me this way. If you accept it, you accept it. If you don't, it's not my problem. Assuming that you're walking it in a righteous way and not some haughty, arrogant kind of way. I'm not talking about that. So context here again is very important. Okay. Towards us that Yahweh has sent as to set apart at liberty his only begotten, only and solely born Son into the world, that we might live through him. In this is love, not that we loved Yahweh, but that he loved us and sent the Son to be an appropriation or an atonement for our sins. Verse 11, Beloved, if Yahweh so loved us, we also ought to be under obligation to love one another. So, you know, if we're going to love Yahweh, then we should be able to express that same kind of love towards brother and sister. It shouldn't be a different kind of love. And this is something that's not so easy to deal with because, quite frankly, it's a little bit easy to love Yahweh who you don't see. But then you see a brother and sister in front of you that just really irks you inside, and they got attitudes and they got issues and they're abrasive, or, you know, they're insensitive, or they're always taking and never giving, or, you know, whatever the cliche statements you can come up with. That's where the rubber meets the road. That's where there's friction. That's where it's really difficult to say to yourself, it don't matter. You know, I see Yeshua in them. I have to treat them with respect because, like I said last week, they are the temple of Yahweh, and Yahweh is residing in there. And we have to be careful with our mouths not to destroy that habitation of Yahweh, because that person is the image, the mirror image of Yahweh. And we have to respect that. We have to change. We have to have a paradigm shift and change in how we see each other. And when we change the way we see, and if we can really see Yahweh or Yeshua living inside that person, your whole view on how you treat other people will be very different. Now, it might sound to some that the way I'm bloviating today, that I'm arrogant and belligerent and all this other stuff. But please understand context. Context of what I'm saying. Don't twist what I'm saying out of proportion. I've already explained myself, so let's move on. In Jeremiah chapter 31, verses 18 through 37, this is where we see the paradox for the Christian. And there's hope for the Christian. And as I've said so many times before, I see them as my brother. I don't hate them. I don't detest them. I yell and I scream at you because somebody's got to do it. Because you're spiritually asleep at the wheel. And you're going to hit a brick wall at some point, and it's my job to try to shake you up and help you to try to understand you need to take a different look at yourself and what you're doing. And so here's an example of what Yahweh says he will do in the end times for the lost sheep of the house of Israel, which is what the Christian church is largely all about. I have surely heard Ephraim, which is Ephraim, bemoaning himself as a vagabond shakes his head in sympathy of you, have chastised with blows to me, and I was chastised like an untrained, not teachable bull. That is a male frisky steer. So he's rambunctious. Christians are rambunctious by nature. They're unconstrained. That's why they're of the wild olive tree. It's not a tree that's been cultivated. They don't want Yahweh trimming their branches and pruning their tree. I like growing wild. I like doing what I'm doing. I don't want nobody to tell me what I can and can't do. Don't talk to me about obedience to the Torah. Let my branches grow the way I want them to grow. So they grow out all over the place. It's crazy. So they're like this non-teachable steer that's frisky. They don't want to be taught. So unfortunately, they're going to have to go through the school of hard knocks. We are privileged to have already learned that lesson, hopefully, and we are conforming ourselves now because look, you know, at the end of the day, what it says in Scripture is, and the bride has made herself ready. A man, I go through this so much time with men and marriage and stuff like that. The men just got this fist and they just beating them. get down, woman. Come on, come under submission. Do what I tell you, you know. And they just beating on the woman all the time. I said, bro, this don't work. Take it from me. I did it for many years. I can write books. I can write encyclopedias. None of it works. You can't reach a woman that way. It doesn't work. But the most beautiful thing is that when a woman has finally decided in her heart, you have finally spoken to her in such a way that it moves her heart, she's yours. She's yours. She belongs to you and nobody else. So in Revelation it says, and she made herself ready. Yahweh didn't necessarily make herself ready. By her own love in her heart for the Messiah, she decided to conform herself. I'm not going to fight him anymore. I'm not going to argue with him anymore. I'm just going to do what he wants me to do because I love him. That's the true heart of a woman. Not one that says, don't feed me none of these laws that you're giving me because I won't be obedient. That's an idolatrous wife. That's a whoring wife. Hard words, but it's the truth because that's Yahweh, how he describes Israel when she whores around and refuses to be obedient. But the obedience doesn't come by the stiff arm. It comes by natural love being placed in the heart. It means there must be a changed heart. And we all can never have too much of a changed heart. And so we have to stop and we have to think within ourselves, have I changed enough? Can I change today and be more of a soft heart of flesh than I was yesterday? Empowering questions give empowering answers. Restore to a circumcised state me, and I will return, for you are Yahweh Elohim. So hope is that at some point they get tired of being beaten up. And finally, life delivers its blow to the Ephraimites, and they finally start saying, that's it, I've had enough. I've had enough. Circumcise me. Cut the foreskin of my heart so that it can bleed, it can feel, and it can receive what it is you've been trying to give it all along, and I've just resisted. Surely after my turning to a circumcised state, I repented. And a strong breath of sigh of being sorry and self-comfort. And after I was instructed, I struck with derision and grief excessively to the point of vomiting. I don't believe I did it. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. And you work yourself up into such a state that you almost want to vomit. This is where Ephraim's got to get to. This is where the Christian church has got to get to. It's not remorseful. It's arrogant. It's defiant. It's anti-Messiah. It's anti-Yeshua. Sad to say. It has not gotten to this state yet. Sure, there are some who are coming out little by little, a remnant that's coming out that Yahweh's working with, and I see more and more of it, and I know we're going to see a whole lot more of it. But we're also seeing a lot of people who are coming who are extremely damaged, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, financially, and they need a changed heart. Yahweh has to change their heart. They have to get to a point where they're tired of being sick and tired. So let's move on. Myself on the thigh, as I was just demonstrating, I was ashamed with paleness, to the point of paleness. Think about the state of mind that these Ephraimites, these Christians are going to have to get to. Yes, even humiliated, wounded with insults and confusion, because I bore the reproach and disgrace of my youth. Man, I had a lot to be disgraceful about my youth in Messiah. I did a lot of really bad stuff in Yeshua, looking back. But to me at the time, it felt very normal in a certain kind of way, because that's who I was at the time. Sure, there was a voice in the back that said, you know that ain't right. You know you gotta start facing this. And yeah, I did know it. But you know what? The gratification of my flesh as a young believer outweighed the voice that was speaking to me. But eventually it caught up to me and I had to deal with it. Verse 20, is Ephraim the double fruit of the son of Joseph, my dear, precious son, which is the builder of a family name? We went through that in the Genesis series. Is he a pleasant child? For though I spoke against him, I earnestly remember and marked as to be recognized him still. Therefore my heart yearns as to cry out aloud for him. I will surely have mercy, love and compassion to the point of fondling on him, says Yahweh. Set up signposts as a guiding pillar and make landmarks. Set your heart with feelings towards the highway, the way in which you went. You see, the road that a person takes down this life, this path of life, is a road that is the road you've got to come back out of. And there are many people that go down this road and then they come to Yeshua and then they find out they need to go back down that road as that process, and they're scared to death of it and they run. And they think by running from what brought them to where they were is going to solve their problems, but instead they just compound their problems. See, what Yahweh wants you to do is Yahweh wants you to confront the unclean spirits in your life that guided you down this highway to begin with. And He wants you to come back out the same road, whooping the rear ends of these unclean spirits that you've now been empowered with, which when I went through the Galatians and Colossians series, talking about the mystery that Paul talked about. That mystery. The fact that angels and demons, or fallen angels, demons, did not know until that moment when Paul was talking what this mystery is that Yahweh had done for man. But when you get empowered in that kind of way, you now come back out that same road that you went down and you're whooping rear end all the way back out. And you're taking back all the territory the enemy has stolen from you along the way. Because remember, Yeshua says, occupy until I come. That means whatever ground you get back that He gives to you, you hold on to it. You don't let it go. You take it back from the enemy. So let's move on to the starting, let's see, toward the highway, the way in which you went. Turn back to the starting point, O virgin bride of Israel. O virgin bride. See, in the state that we're talking about here, they're not operating particularly like a virgin bride. They're in the process of coming out of their whoredom and into a status of a bride. But He considers them a virgin bride. Israel, turn back to these your cities. Verse 22, how long will you gad or withdraw yourself about? O you backsliding who are apostate, living as heathens. And that's what the church is. They live as heathens. We just went through Christmas and all this stuff, you know, with the churches. There was one famous evangelist, I saw a clip, and somebody wrote in about Christmas being pagan, and he admitted, yeah, it is pagan. So out of your own mouth, you're admitting you're worshiping a demonic Elohim on Christmas Day. And you've been in this for 40 years and you still haven't figured this out yet? What is the matter with you? But that's that hardened heart that's in the Christian church and even in the body of Yeshua. That hardened heart is not a changed heart. And until it changes, you can't come out. You're going to continue to go down this highway that's going to beat the living daylights out of your carcass until you finally cry uncle and say, I've had enough. For Yahweh, I'm sorry, I think I went back too far. For Yahweh has created a new thing that is fresh in the earth. A woman from the sexual form shall encompass, return, and whirl around a man. Whirl, like we did on the Torah thing today, how Tom stood there with it and all the dancers circle around. That's a woman that cherishes this man. This is a woman that honors and respects this man. Because a woman that doesn't honor and respect the man is going to buck and fight, buck and fight. Just constantly bucking and fighting, arguing, contentiousness. But that's not what is being described here. This is one that finally is considered a virgin. And that's the one that has made herself ready, as spoken in Revelation. Verse 23, thus says Yahweh of hosts, an army organized for war, the Elohim of Israel. They shall again use this speech in the land of Judah and in its cities when I bring back their captivity. Yahweh bless you, O home of justice. moral and legal prosperity. That's what that word justice means. It's with legal, moral prosperity, and mountain of holiness and consecration. And there shall dwell in Judah itself and all the cities together farmers and those going out with flocks. Verse 25, for I have satiated or satisfied with the soaking of water the weary that is faint with thirstiness of the soul. Are you faint with thirstiness? Are you so sick and tired of this world and the religious confusion of what you come out with that it's brought you to this point where you're so thirsty, you're dying for these living waters that Yeshua said he would give? If you're not, and you're content with your pagan Christianity, stay over there. Because you got more whoopings that's got to take place until you decide to conform. Or until Yahweh decides you've had enough and he changes your heart. And this love that Yahweh has can then be imparted to you. And then you can start on that highway back out of where you came from. And I have replenished every sorrowful soul. After this I awoke and looked around, and my sleep was sweet as agreeable pleasantness to me. Behold, the days are coming, says Yahweh, that I will sow and conceive seed in the house of Israel. The Ruach HaKodesh is that holy seed that's in us now. And it's that seed that has been imparted to our heart that has made our heart change to the point where we can have this kind of love that John is talking about. In the house of Israel and the house of Judah, with the seed of man and the seed of beast. And it shall come to pass that I have watched with alertness over them to pluck up by the roots, to break down, to throw down, by breaking into pieces, to destroy, to loose oneself and perish. Something strange just passed by me. That was weird. To loose oneself and perish. And to afflict as to come to nothing. So I will watch with alertness over them to build and plant, says Yahweh. So he's talking about transformation, coming that road back out. In those days they shall say no more, the fathers have eaten sour, immature grapes. And the children, sons of Boulder of the family names, teeth are set on edge as dullness. But every one shall die for his own iniquity. And you've heard it said, nobody's coming into the kingdom on somebody else's coattails. You're going to have to work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. Your mate's not getting it in. Your friend's not getting it. Nope, you're going to come in by yourself. You and Yeshua working that work out. That's the only way that's going to happen. Behold, the days are coming, says Yahweh, when I will make a blood covenant with passing between two pieces of flesh, a new with freshness covenant that is between the cutting of two pieces of flesh, with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that is between the cutting of the two pieces of flesh that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them as to seize with strength by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt. See, going back to the story to this couple that I was talking about earlier, what I was saying to them was that this covenant is a covenant that, how did I put it to them? That what I said was, you guys are misunderstanding what the Brit Kadashah is. You got, in the Christian church, what they think is that the Torah is the old covenant and it's done away. So what I said to them was, I grabbed some papers. I said, imagine this stack of papers is the Torah. You two get married, okay, with the best of intentions. A few years goes by, bickering, fighting, arguing, hardening of hearts. You split and go your separate ways. You stay separate. You don't get remarried, but you just separated, okay? And so you can't stand one another. Now, this first contract that you guys have won't work. It won't change your heart. If anything, it's going to bring things out of your heart that's detestable, that needs to be weeded out of your life. But because of the hardness of your heart, you won't let it get weeded out because pride is preventing it from being weeded out. So I said, so let's say a couple years goes by. Yahweh's working on you, the husband. Yahweh's working on you, the wife. And then you start to feel remorseful. And you start to realize, you know what? This is not what I bargained for. I was too hard on my husband. I was too hard on my wife. I shouldn't have been fighting with my husband. I should have been fighting with my wife. And it goes on and on and on. I'm saying to this couple. I said, so then there comes a point, and this actually happened a couple of weeks ago, of a lady I've been counseling who's been separated from her husband for 5 years. Their believers are in Yeshua. And through a teaching that I gave, she said it brought the husband back. They sat and they talked, and they both realized after 5 years of being separated, the both of them, their hearts had changed. And they reunited. That day, they reunited. They moved back in with each other, and everything seems to be fine. This is kind of what I'm talking about. So what I said was, now the two of you come back together, and you look at each other from a completely different set of eyes than the time that you had separated. Because now the wife's heart has become softened. Now the husband's heart has become softened. And so now you have a new heart. So I said, so imagine this first contract. Are you going to tell me that this first agreement that you guys originally got married on, you're telling me that that is now tore up and you burned it in a fire, that none of those laws in that marriage are still binding? And they said, no, it's still binding. I said, exactly. So I said, so what is the new covenant? What the new covenant is simply that Yahweh will sprinkle clean water on you, and He will give you a new heart so that you can do that first contract. The new contract is just a single piece of paper stapled to the first contract. It's an addendum. I said the second piece of paper basically says, where you didn't have a heart to keep the first contract, I am now going to change your heart and soften it to the point that you can keep the first contract. You're now empowered to keep the first contract. That's all that the New Testament is. It doesn't do away with the Old Covenant. If anything, it ratifies it on a much greater level, because Yeshua says, I came to make it more binding than it was before. The church says, oh no, it's less binding because it doesn't exist. This is insane. This is a carnal mind that is speaking when you talk like that. You're an enemy of Yahweh. You're an enemy of Yeshua. In Matthew 5:17, I went through that several times. He who breaks the least of the commandments and run around telling people you break them also is not getting into the kingdom. Period. You're not getting in. You're wasting your time. You might as well go out there in the world and party and have a good time. Gosh, man alive. How is it we can't get this? Has the devil deluded us so bad? I would have to say yes. Because the gospel message is a very simple message. If you can understand its core tenets. It's a very simplistic, easy to understand, only if your heart and your mind has been transformed. If it hasn't, you're going to be hostile against that thing. You're going to fight against that thing with violence. You detest it because your flesh detests it. That's the litmus test. If your flesh is telling you you don't need that stuff, you're in the flesh. You don't have the Spirit of the Messiah. Because the Spirit of the Messiah would not tell you to go against Him. Okay, let's move on. Verse 32. My covenant that is between the cutting of the two pieces of flesh, which they broke, violated and disannulled it, though I was a husband to them, says Yahweh. But this is the covenant that is between the cutting of the two pieces of flesh that I will make as an alliance with the house of Israel after those days, says Yahweh. I will put and fasten and restore my law in their minds. There you go. This is the new covenant. This is the whole New Testament right here in basically this verse. Where you couldn't do it before, I'm going to give you the capacity to do it. When you detested it before, you're going to love it with passion. That's not natural. That is not natural. Do we get that? It's not natural to love Yahweh's laws. It's natural as human beings for us to hate them and fight against them. That's the carnal mind that Satan had put in Adam and Eve when they took of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That's the nature that we took on. And that's why we need to be regenerated. Verse 33, and write, or as to engrave it on their hearts, and in their bowels and inward parts. And I will be their Elohim, and they shall be my people. No more shall every man teach his neighbor and every man his brother, saying, Know Yahweh, for they shall all know me, from the least in age or importance of them to the greatest of them, says Yahweh. For I will forgive their sins or iniquities, and their sin I will remember no more. Thus says Yahweh, who gives the sun for a light by day, and the ordinances, appointing of the moon, with its lunation, and the stars for a light, and its illumination by night, the twisting away of light. And it's interesting, that word lail, because when I went through the whole Passover series, I showed just how little people seem to understand that there are 4 phases of night. And that's the whole key in understanding what went on during the Passover. If you don't understand the 4 phases of what night is, which nobody's teaching on, you're not going to understand the various phases of the Passover that Yeshua and the disciples went through. But anyway, that's another story. Who disturbs the sea, and its waves roar, Yahweh of hosts is his name. If those ordinances, appointed times, depart from before me, says Yahweh, then the seed of Israel shall also cease from being a nation before me forever. Verse 37, thus says Yahweh, if heaven above can be measured as to stretch a line, and the foundation of the earth stretch out beneath, I will also cast off, abhor, and reject all the seed of Israel for all that they have done, says Yahweh. In conclusion, I hope that I was able to make my point very clear. Number one, unless we have a changed heart, and Yahweh puts that new heart on us, we are not going to be able to make the kind of changes that you want to make. Just not going to be able to do it. Number two, I hope that I was able to illustrate the point again. There is a huge difference between the covenant in the Sunday keeping church and the covenant we have with Yeshua. I explained explicitly what it means to deny the Son and the Father. If you're denying the covenant of Torah, you have denied that Messiah, Yeshua, came to establish his Father's will. And his will is that his laws, which is his heart and his mind, is written on the heart of every single human being that would ever exist. We know that that's not going to happen, but hopefully the vast majority of mankind from Adam and Eve all the way up until the end of the millennium, hopefully most of them will allow his Spirit to write his laws on his heart, and they will receive eternal life. This is a simple concept, what John is trying to get across. Very simple. The church and Messianic congregations have messed it up so bad that the average person can't decipher what in the world's really being said. Context is everything. Context is everything. If we're honest with ourselves and we pick apart these scriptures step by step and you deconstruct what he's saying, it leads you only to one conclusion. Only one conclusion. There is a difference in these covenants. And the evidence is the fact that the church has not crossed over yet to the Hebraic roots, is the evidence that their heart has not changed yet. They may have good intentions, but many good intentions are paved with ill-willed roads. And we all have got to be honest with ourselves. If we're going to be honest with ourselves, we can be honest with our brothers and sisters. But let me tell you, it was not a thrill to have to confront these Christians and tell them that they are pagan idol worshipers. But Yahweh would not let me pull any punches, and they took it very well. They even called later to my wife and said, we want to thank you. We want to thank you because we had such a great time, and we came out of there with our heads filled with so much more understanding that we never had before. Baruch Hashem. Because if I would have done it with the spirit of malice, I'm sure they would have received the spirit of malice and there would be hostility. I didn't give it with malice. I gave it because Yahweh instructed me, pull no punches. Tell it exactly like it is, right down the middle. Don't water it down. There was a part of me that wanted to water it down because I didn't want to offend. He said, no, you tell it right down the middle, exactly the way it is. So am I saying that's the way you always got to do it? No, I'm not. But in my case, he said to me, you don't pull any punches. And if he's telling you that and you pull the punches, you have hell to pay. And your conscience is going to be disturbed and bothered because you did not listen to righteous instruction from the Ruach. So we're all going to have to get some chutzpah in the body of Messiah, because the devil's going to come at us with double-barrel spiritual shotguns, and he's going to put a bunch of buckshot in our rear ends. And we're going to have to be able to withstand that. And I can rather tell you, at least for me, it's fun. I enjoy it. I enjoy it. So let's close in prayer. Abba, Father, in the name of Yeshua, we just want to bless you and thank you, Yahweh, for this love that we're just, for me, I'm going to say, I think I'm just beginning to understand it a little bit. A little bit. And your love is so great that I don't even think that in our natural states that we're in right now, no matter how much of the Ruach you give us, I don't think we could ever really tap into the full measure of whatever that is. But praise be the name of Yeshua and his blood and the covenant that you've given to us, that you will preserve us until the end times, Abba. And not only will you preserve us to the end times, but we will make ourselves ready along the way as that chaste virgin bride. And we as individuals, as well as collectively, will say, I am ready. I am ready. I'm ready to take whatever's coming my way. I'm not going to deny Yeshua. I'm not going to deny the Father. I'm going to uphold the covenant message that he came, that the commandments and the Torah are still alive and well and in force and working in my life. I pray now, Yahweh, the lost sheep of the house of Israel that are in these Christian churches, I speak no ill will towards them. I pray for your mercy and your compassion on them. I know you're holding them in some kind of a holding pattern for a reason that's greater than maybe we can understand. Maybe the timing is just not right. But I pray, Yahweh, that each and every one of them, that you will illuminate their hearts and impart that love, that undying love, that righteous love that you have, that you've given to us, that you do the same for them, that they may come join us on this side of the Jordan River and become true Hebraic roots believers in Yeshua HaMashiach in the full sense of that word. And we bless you and thank you in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach. Amen. Amen.